Hey Festers, welcome back to Living My Fest Life, a podcast about festivals, fairs, events, and experiences, everything from the nationally known to the local and obscure. And today I'm talking to my friend Mat Alano-Martin about the Limestone Comedy Festival, or as it's known in the comedy community, just Limestone. This is going to be a unique episode where we talk more about what it's like to apply to the festival from a comedic experience. Of course, we're going to tell you what it's like to be an audience member for those of you who are not comedians, but I just wanted to let you know it is very comic centric. So I hope you still listen in because you're going to learn a lot about this festival. It's really, really cool. I think it's one of those things that everybody needs to go check out. If you are a fan of comedy, this is the holy grail. Listen, it's a really great festival. So please enjoy my talk with Mat Alano-Martin and check out Limestone Comedy Festival.
I'm living my best life.
So Limestone Comedy Festival takes place in Bloomington, Indiana every year, and it has for how many years?
This will be the 8th year.
Oh my gosh. Isn't it weird to have an 8-year-old baby like that?
Yes. When you put it like that, it's very weird.
Yeah, it's actually even more weird. Okay, so tell me about Bloomington, Indiana, and what the culture is around there, because I think when people think Indiana, they think cornfields and corn mazes and all the corn accessories. So
And the band Korn.
absolutely.
A lot of fans there in Indiana. Bloomington, Indiana is a Big Ten college town. Indiana University is located there, and so it is very different from the rest of the state of Indiana. Mm-hmm. But it still maintains a lot of that character. You know, there's a town and gown situation. I actually didn't go to the university. So I guess I'm more of on the towny side of things.
Uh-huh. You wear your bowler hat into town, into the square.
My bowler hat? What is that?
I don't know. I just feel like towny is like an old-fashioned word.
I ride my penny farther.
Yes, into the town square to play your accordion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course, yeah. I like that it's old-timey or we're just like doing like the most hipster thing possible.
Either one works in Bloomington, I
think it would, yeah. I moved to Bloomington in 1999 and I just fell in love with it and I've been there ever since. And it's an interesting place because you do have this mix of intellectual liberalism, and also in the university system, you also have this a huge Greek system, you know. Mm-hmm. So you have that sort of energy of the fraternities and sororities, and they have like, you know, I think I drive Uber and Lyft sometimes, and even people from other college towns are kind of blown away by like the sorority row, like because the houses are massive. They look like giant mansions and things like that.
I've seen it, and I remember trying to pick mine out and be like, I wonder if I just showed up and I was like, hey girls, if they'd be like, get out, like we don't know who you are. They'd be like, welcome.
Is there a secret handshake or something?
There is a secret handshake. There's a secret password. There's all the secrets.
On your deathbed, will you tell the secret password?
If I tell it, I'm already dead.
I was going to say, that's why I'm saying you're already passing into the next life. So then you're like, well, I might as well throw these bitches under the bus.
Yeah. I don't know. What if they just come into the room and resuscitate me and they're like, yeah, we know what you did.
Just to torture you for eternity? Yeah. Just so you can go on trial.
This sounds like the sorority horror film that I'm destined to write.
Okay,
I love it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then there's also, you know, it's a very blue collar town as well when you get off of the campus. There's a great independent arts and entertainment scene there too, which is where I think we kind of fall in to play because we, Jared, my partner in the festival, also did not go to IU and is not originally from Bloomington. And so people like the town because there's a certain mojo to it, you know. Some places just have it.
It's a really interesting place. I've never been through something like that. The last time I went, I was working at the Comedy Attic, hanging out with you, and I was staying in a tiny home in the back of someone's house. It was an Airbnb in the backyard of someone's house. It was amazing. And then every morning I would either go to the farmer's market or I would rent a bike. There's a bike rental place and there's all these bike trails you can do. And I'm just like, where am I? Like, I feel like I'm in heaven right now.
Well, you were. No, no. I mean, we have our problems too. But yeah, no, there's a big push for like quality of life is a big thing in Bloomington. And I think it's like that in a lot of college towns. I feel like you also get that vibe at Madison, Wisconsin and things like that, where if that sort of is part of the appeal. And it's also a strategy too. It's to retain people after they graduate college. After they graduate college, to stop brain drain, you know.
What are you going to do? You don't have a bike anymore. You got it. I don't know. Okay, so you're living in Bloomington and you have done stand-up comedy for a really long time. I mean, you and I were talking last night. Like your story is like so cool. you were in bands and into the music scene, and you were a music writer, and then you were also putting together music tours, and then someone threw you into a comedy tour to put together, and then you got to open for Ralphie May.
Yeah.
And then what?
And then I wound up here, sitting on your couch.
I know. That fast.
Yep. It's.
Can you believe you made it to this point?
Yeah, I was a tour manager for bands. I played in bands pretty much my whole life, and was always the sort of responsible member of the band that I was in. And from that, I then started getting hired by bigger, more successful bands to go out as part of their road crew. Eventually working my way up to being their tour manager, which is just basically the adult. You make sure everybody gets where they're supposed to be on time. Make sure the money gets. Do
you like that, or were you like?
It was a great midlife crisis job.
Okay.
Because I was going through a divorce, and my friends are in this band called Murder by Death.
I met them.
Yeah.
Yes,
oh yeah, that's right. You went over to their house.
Yes,
Yeah, you went over to their house.
I love them so much.
Yeah.
And RoboCop,
their dog was awesome.
The best.
But they basically asked me to go out with them on a run. We were just friends at that time. And basically because I was going through a divorce and I had just gotten laid off from my job and I was essentially trying to drink myself to death.
Yeah.
Real leaving Las Vegas, Vegas situation. And then they were like, hey, why don't you go on this run with us and just sell T-shirts? We'll throw you some money if you just hang out with us and sell T-shirts for us on this tour.
I need friends like this,
and so basically I'm the only person I know that went on tour with a rock band to sober up. And so they did. And then like halfway through that run, they told me that their tour manager, Will, was leaving. He was moving up to like bigger and better things. And so they asked me if I wanted to take his position. And then the last half of that run, Will basically trained me how to be a tour manager.
Awesome.
And then I tour managed them and a couple other bands, like Langhorne Slim was another big band that I tour managed for a while. For like 7-8 years, I did that.
I think that's such a cool thing to do because as someone who goes to things, it's like the production value behind some stuff. Like you don't think about all the hours and the work and the people that are running around behind the scenes making everything happen.
It's an army of people. When you go to a big festival, like Lollapalooza, for example, in Chicago, once it stopped being a touring production and just landed in Chicago every year, and it's just going to be an annual thing. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that Lollapalooza used to be a traveling tour.
I did not know. I always thought it was in Chicago.
No,
I'm a little baby.
For the first couple of years of it, they took it all across the country, kind of like similar to like Warped Tour.
I went to the Warped Tour,
right. Okay,
so I know that.
It was that model, right? But once they landed in Chicago, they basically just started, if you were any sort of tour manager, production manager, particularly in the Midwest, who wasn't otherwise engaged, you could get a gig going and working Lollapalooza because they need an army of production people.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big thing, It takes a ton of people. Like, I don't know if you've ever done theater, but just think about the number of people behind the scenes on a theater production and then multiply that by 100.
Yeah. That's so you were the responsible person. Did you have a walkie-talkie?
Walkie-talkie. I don't think I ever had a walkie-talkie. I think I was doing it into the age of cell phones.
Okay.
And so, no, because venue staff would have walkie-talkies where they could talk to each other, but I would just tell some venue staff person what I needed.
You would just tell somebody to talk. Okay. Yeah. I just feel like I'd be like type A, and if no one could hear me, I'd be like, I gotta yell it across the room.
I've definitely had to bail people out of jail.
Yeah.
I definitely have had to call emergency rooms looking for people.
Oh my gosh.
So it's
So the responsibility. So you live in Bloomington, Indiana. Yes. You're doing stand-up comedy after being the tour managers and you come across the Comedy Attic, which is like a sacred place for comedy.
Yeah.
And you hook up with Jared and you guys decide.
No, please don't.
Oh, sorry.
You start this room at that time. I got my start in comedy.
You make out with Jared.
I made out my way to the middle. That's what I did.
You and Jared decide to do a comedy festival, or what was your first initial thoughts about that?
So I actually knew Jared before he opened the club.
Oh wow! Cool.
When I stopped working the road for bands, there was about a year in the middle there, so I'd been doing it for about 4 years. When the couple of bands that I worked for, none of them were touring; they were all recording albums, taking time off. So I didn't have a job essentially. And so I decided, I was like, okay, I can send out some feelers to try to get on a different tour, whatever. And I also, at the same time, sent out a couple of job applications locally in Bloomington because I'd been gone up for 4 years, pretty much. Yeah. And I was like, well, we'll just see what happens. And I kind of immediately got hired by the local cable company, which was like, cool, I'll have health insurance for the first time in several years.
Yeah.
I'll just go do this for a while. And
were you a cable man?
No.
Oh.
I was a cable person because we don't use gender.
Well, I don't picture you going on roofs and digging trenches and then.
I've done all kinds of jobs like that in the past.
Oh.
Yeah. No, girl, come on.
Matt will steal your cable, guys.
I will steal your cable.
He will splice your networks.
I was the guy who loved to give away cable to his friends. No, I was a tech guy in a call center thing. But Jared worked there. Jared, owner of the Comedy Attic, worked there.
Very cool.
And the origin of the Comedy Attic basically is that Jared was a manager who was upper management. And we kind of hit it off because he grew up playing in bands and was a music person. So we just would talk about that stuff. And then they were closing our local office. Comcast bought the cable company, and they were closing our local office. And because he was management, he got like a buyout. Since he wasn't willing to move, all the management people got like a little bit of a buyout, whereas then the rest of us just got laid off. But Jared, that was the thing that kind of kicked him into doing it. He wanted to do it, and then was like, okay, well, I'm losing my job, so we might as well make the leap. And so then he opened the club. And anyway, so I know Jared, and he opens the club, and I go back on the road for a couple years and tour managing again. And then, I just went to an open mic once, and then I was hooked.
Yeah.
And then I did stand up for a couple of years and started getting into a few festivals. And there were things that I liked about them and things that I hated about them. Mm-hmm. And essentially it was like the better mousetrap idea. It was like, I remember driving back from a festival where I didn't have a particularly great experience, not because of anything on stage, just I thought the way that they ran it and the way that they treated the non-famous comedians was not great. And so on the drive back to Bloomington, I just basically constructed the idea of what Limestone would be, like how it would structurally work. And then I went to Jared like the next week. I was like, I have an idea.
Here's this napkin that I wrote on while I was driving. And he's like, I can't read this, Matt. Why
That's
would you
dangerous.
give me this?
Why would you be writing on a napkin while you're driving?
Yeah.
No, and so I presented the idea to him, and obviously coming from like a long history of production, because also before I tour managed bands, I was an event manager for.
That's gotta be shitty to sit at events sometimes and just be like, know what they're doing wrong.
I've gotten to the point now where I just kind of like I don't think I was ever where I would try to jump in and like take over something. But I would definitely like grouse under my breath, like I can't believe you. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Now it's like, if I go to a festival, I'm just a comic, man.
Yeah, you get to.
Exactly. I'm just here to hang out and do my set and not worry about everything else. And I also know how hard it is too.
Yeah.
So I presented the idea to him. Someone had hit him up about doing a festival maybe a year earlier, but they didn't really have any experience in doing it. And he also told me it wasn't nearly as well thought out. Mm-hmm. And so really Limestone did not change very much from that initial idea. We spent a year and a half working on it before the first year. So just kind of putting all the pieces together and figuring out how we wanted to do it, lining up people, things like that.
I can't believe in 8 years. Like, it's only been 8 years. It is one of the festivals that you go to as a comic that's like the best.
We try.
The reputation is so good.
We try, yeah. And that was one of the things that I wanted to establish with it, and it's maybe not popular with some people, but we were talking about this last night.
Yeah. A
lot of comedy festivals, we were right before the explosion too. Like when we started Limestone, there were a handful of comedy festivals in the country, but not many. There was Boston, there was the Old Guard, there was Boston and Seattle and San Francisco that had been around forever. Moon Tower, I think, started a year before us, but it's kind of a corporate-y thing, and there's not really submissions. You have to have, like, agents to get into. Yeah, you have to be in. Yeah. There's a couple of those, but as far as, like, submission-based festivals, Laughing Skull had been going for a year or two.
There's literally, like, really good festivals and then really, really bad ones, and then, like...
I've done a couple of middle ones. I've done a couple of ones that are in the middle.
Like, I've either done... luckily all but like one or two of mine that have been really good. Yeah. Like I've gotten really lucky that the ones that I've picked or been asked to do have been like, well, but the one or two that haven't, I'm just like, what did I drove all the way out here.
Yeah. Or you spend a ton of money. But what I was going to say is that from the jump, we wanted it to be as objective as possible because a lot of festivals just seem to be based on nepotism and favoritism and things like that. And I remember one of the earliest compliments we had at the festival from some comic that was selected and got in is we used to do these video testimonial things, right? Yeah. And somebody said it was like, they were like, yeah, it's a festival you go to, and at no point do you look and go, how did this person get in? Yeah. This person's terrible, because we have a 4-person review panel that's not Jared or I. We're not on it. And it's usually an industry person from the West Coast and an industry person from the East Coast, a comic who we know is not coming, right? We already know that they're unavailable or whatever, and a comedy fan. That's the basic makeup of it.
That makes me feel so much happier, like, because I got in one year.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, oh, it's because they think I'm cool. But now that I hear this, I'm just like, I might be good at comedy.
You might be good at comedy. Or at least you were that year.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
It's all downhill. Time to tour manage. I want to be
exactly.
you.
Reverse it. No. And so the way that we do it is I pre-screen the videos and mostly just to make sure that they work. So many comics are so bad at this. Like they'll send you a link that's broken because they didn't copy the whole thing.
Oh man,
and so I have to or it's like set to private so you can't see it without a password. So basically, I just make sure everything is the way it's supposed to be.
Which I love about you because instead of being like, well, this fuckface can't figure it out, give me your $25 and leave. You will email them back and be like, hey man, can I get a different link or
well, because I mean we try to give everybody a fair shot. I mean because anybody I've. And this is after I ran Limestone for several years. I copied and pasted the wrong link when I submitted to Big Sky. For some reason, in the video submission link, I posted my website link or something. Yeah. And then I caught it. I was like, I had to write them and like, I'm so sorry. I hadn't had enough coffee. Here's my actual video link. Can you please, So I get it, man. It's easy to make a mistake sometimes. And but so I pre-screen them, and then I also will now at this point will pre-screen them to see if there's any like sexist, racist, homophobic, just garbage that they're not going to get into the festival. We're not going to. Jared and I won't let them in, right? Because we have basic standards. And I don't want to waste the panel's time because they had the panel.
How many videos do you think they watch?
The panel watches around 500 videos.
Wow. Yeah. And they're 5 minutes each.
They're 5 minutes each.
Wow.
Yeah.
After a while.
They don't do it all at once.
I just feel like after a while, it's like that. It might be hard to pick what's your best. I mean, the objection of like, if you ask people who their favorite comedian is, they'll say so-and-so. And if you ask them who their second is, sometimes it's nowhere near the genre or the style or I mean, there's just so many different strokes for different folks.
But that's also why I don't like competitions. I mean, I've done competitions because sometimes they're good exposure and things like that. But you cannot. It's not just apples and oranges. It's apples and the rest of the produce section. That's what's great about comedy. Yeah. And so the way that we do it, and to try to stop that fatigue thing, is that I basically send the review people, and the review people also don't know who each other are. It's a blind thing. They get.
Oh, so they're not in the same room with each other?
No. Because like one of them's usually like there's somebody in New York, usually somebody in LA or Seattle or. Sometimes we have Midwest industry.
I always pictured them in the same room, and it's always a really shitty coffee, really shitty coffee in the corner, just kind of like bad fluorescent lighting, and then a VCR for some reason. I know everything's submitted digitally, but I just pictured.
No, VCR. We actually take the time to put it all on VHS.
And
John.
I just picture like by the time they get to my tape, they're like, "We're really tired."
Yeah. Well, there's some groups that do that. I mean, I'm friends with some other festival producers now. And they get in a room and fight it out. The review panel, like there's like a good festival, and basically someone can just have such a like fierce dedication to one person that if they can argue, if they can beat down the rest of the panel's will. That's how
I pictured it. Like the movie Admission with Tina Fey, when she's like when everybody has to fight for the kid that they really want to get in.
Yeah. It's not like that. That's not how we do it. Okay. That sounds horrible to me. No, the way that we do it is I email them an Excel spreadsheet, and it just literally 50 at a time, and it literally just has the person's name and the link. That's it. They don't know what city they're from. They don't know their credits. They don't know any of that stuff. We just want them to judge the video. You
don't put the credits or anything in there.
No, because we want to discover people.
It's really so unbiased. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious when somebody's tape is their Conan set or something like that. There's no way to avoid that. But then the reviewers vote either yes, maybe no. And yes is worth 2 points, maybe it's worth 1 point, no is worth 0 points. And they can also make notes as to if they really, really love somebody or why they put maybe. Usually they'll put the notes down as like why they said maybe. Yeah. Like, I like the jokes, but maybe the delivery's not quite there or something. Or I started off loving this, but that last joke, I don't know. Like something like that. Okay. And so then they send it back to me 50 at a time. And to stop the sort of fatigue aspect, I always tell them, I was like, don't watch more than 10 a day. You're watching 5 minutes of video. That's 1 hour. Carve out an hour. You have 2 weeks to get me back this 50. So you don't even have to do it. You don't even have to do it 5 days in a row.
Right.
Just sit down. Don't watch more than 10 because you'll start to hate comedy.
Oh, I can't imagine.
It's like sitting through an endless open mic.
Right.
You know? And so then they send it back. I compile them. And then Jared and I look at the top scores because we have the 4. So the maximum score you can get is 8. Right. So then we look at the top, like probably about 80 or so score wise. And then we select from that our 45. So that we invite to the festival. So I always say, if you're my friend and you make it in that top 85 or so, 80, yeah, you're probably coming, right?
Yeah.
I am a human being.
Yeah.
I do have like allegiances to people in my life, but we remove that. That's at the end. You have to be at least good enough to get into that. I mean, I have friends that I'm really good friends with who they're good comics too, but they just cannot get good tape. They just cannot
Tapes
do it.
are hard. It sometimes your jokes will work in a room that you don't tape it in and people are loving you and they're cutting up and you didn't tape it that night. And then when you go to tape it, you get an audience that's like really tight and don't want to laugh or they're tired or they go, ooh, at one of your jokes and you're like, what? That's not even, what?
It's amazing. I mean, we're all delusional to do this. We're all delusional to do this
Totally.
thing.
I mean, we're not,
Because at this level, I mean, there's not hardly any money. A lot of times we're like breaking even if we're lucky, sometimes losing money to do this. Even when you start to do it kind of professionally, it's like a very like...
Which we talked about last night.
Exactly.
We were driving back from a gig and I was like, man.
You have to basically just take the value of your time out of it. If you start thinking like, well, today was a 18-hour day or whatever, you can't even put that into the equation.
Right.
You know, monetarily. But I forget where I was going with this now. Something about the taping stuff. I was going to say some of the best advice I've ever gotten, some comics do this, is just tape every set.
Yeah.
It's cheap enough to do it because you never know when you're going to get a good tape and when you're not. When you try to make it happen, it almost never will happen. Yeah. You know, Greg Warren actually told me one time when I was like still submitting for like late night spots and stuff like that. He said, the best thing to do is every 6 months, figure out what you think is your best 5 to 10 minutes that would work on television, would work as a festival submission thing, right? And then you do that set as many times you can in the month, doing guest spots, doing mics, whatever. You tape every single one of them. You find the best take of it, and then you submit it or you don't, but you have that. And then he's like, and then you forget about it for 6 months. He's like, that way you always have a fairly recent tape. Yeah. But then also you're not driving yourself crazy trying to chase that perfect 5 minutes. Right. You can go back to writing and being creative and being a performer. And that's something I try to do.
That even sounds exhausting, though. Like, it does because, like, I don't know, to get a 5-minute tape to be the way you want it to be, you're always going to scrutinize. Did I say this line right? And then you're like, well, what are my here's what I think the audience favorite 5 minutes is. It's not my favorite 5 minutes. Like, for me, I want to talk about my dead bodies joke. That would never make, you know what I mean? So, like, what I like versus what other people would like.
Yeah, you can drive yourself crazy. That also when you start thinking about, like, well, what does this festival want? Exactly. Because what's the vibe, which I think is good to take into account, if only to save yourself money. Yeah. Right.
Like you said, if you're pre-screening for bigotry and misogyny and all these things that you don't want, like, do you guys put that up front? Like, hey, by the way, if you're submitting to this and your jokes are all about how much you hate whatever group of people, maybe this is not the festival for you.
I don't think we put it on the sort of the rules page of it. I don't know. I don't think we put, I don't know. Yeah. To me, there's also should be a certain amount of agency on and if you're a racist shithead, then thank you for your money. We'll donate that to charity. Exactly. You know, we do a lot of charity stuff throughout the year.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about okay, so you get into the festival, which is cool. Mm-hmm. What makes this festival different than other festivals?
Well, one of the main things is that a lot of festivals are sort of divided into two camps, where there are the famous headliner shows. Yes. And then there are the showcases of unknown talent, right? And so the festival that I was driving back from, that was exactly how it was. There were no openers on the famous headliner shows at all. And then the unfamous comics, where you'd be like across the street from Whoopi Goldberg or Anthony Jeselnik or something some very famous name drawing person, right? And then you're in the basement of a frat bar with 9 other equally unfamous people literally competing against that show.
Yeah.
Like, why would anybody come see us? You know, other than it's obviously way cheaper to see our show than it is theirs.
And one of my favorite things that happened when the year I went, you guys invited everybody to the opening show, which for
Right.
my year was Emo Phillips and Patton Oswalt. So you invited all of the unknowns to see the heavy hitter. We got to experience that, and it kicks off the festival, which I had, it was amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's the other part of it. So, like, in our festival, the submission level comics who get selected, the 45, we call them our features.
Yeah.
They get to do 2 shows, and both of those shows are opening for a headliner. Yeah. The only show that's not a headliner show, with the exception of like a specialty show, like a podcast or something like that, is we have a local showcase called the Bloomington, which is the 10 like sort of up and coming.
Which is so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. You think you're like, oh, it's just the local guys.
Yeah.
The Bloomington comedy scene is freaking amazing. I don't know what you guys have in the water there, but it's like, I love that. Watching that show, watching Jonas and Stephanie and everybody year after year just like crush.
Yeah.
Like,
well, but we also, it's not against anything.
Yeah.
So they're not going opposite Whoopi Goldberg or whatever. So even though it's the only non-headliner show, we try to give them the best audience we can. But so not only would you get into the festival, Kelly Clip, you also get to open for, usually it's 2 different headliners, depending on how the scheduling works. So you get those sort of credits and connections. And then also, the submission level comics get to go to everything else for free, which I've done festivals where that wasn't the case, where you literally could go do your show and then that's it. And if you wanted to go see Patton Oswalt, you had to shell out the $45 or whatever, even though you're technically in the same festival.
Right.
So that was the 2 main things I wanted to obliterate with ours. And then the third thing is from the customer standpoint, a lot of festivals are called festivals, but they're really just a bunch of comedy shows in the same weekend. Every show is single ticketed. Every single show, other than the fact that they've put a brand on it, there's nothing that really connects it. Coming from the music world, when you go to Lollapalooza, you buy a badge, you see all the bands on all the stages. You see whoever you want because that badge gets you in. And that's what we do. Like, your badge gets you into every single show. You have to make some choices sometimes. Am I going to see Dana Gould or am I going to see Emo Phillips because they're on at the same time? But then also scheduling-wise for the headliners, we also have most of our headliners do multiple shows. So you could pretty much see every single headliner you wanted to. And we also wanted to keep it inexpensive because a lot of them are cash grabs.
well, and then you also did some VIP badges the year that I went, where you had the people who are festival attendees who could do karaoke with the stand-up comics. You have these inclusive events where you get these true comedy fans who come out to these festivals and they want to interact with the comics too, and the comics want to interact with them, you know?
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah, some of them.
The karaoke party is kind of become famous at this point, and we've done, sometimes we do duets.
Yeah.
Was that the thing that happened to you? Yeah, where so then it's a comic paired with a comedy fan. And I think the most kind of famous example of this was Ryan Singer did
Time of Your Life. I was there.
With Alex Brown, who's a pretty big, stocky dude, and Alex Brown did the lift, the Patrick Swayze lift. But you know, also like Jimmy Pardo did a Peter Cetera, Emmy Grant song with some random fan because you know Pardo's a huge Chicago fan. We try to make it more. From the attendees point, it's designed for the comedy nerd. It's designed for people that are hardcore into comedy that want to come to 3 days worth of shows.
Yeah.
You don't have to. We do have single tickets available for people that only want to see Margaret Cho or only want to see Kamau Bell or something like that. And that's great too. Like we want it to be for everybody. But then we started building these VIP packages, which is like reserved up front seating, these different experiences. You get to have brunch with the comics one day, you know, just sort of bridge the gap a little bit.
Which also I feel like unites the comics. You get to mix and mingle with other people, which sometimes you go to a festival, you do your show, you go home.
Yeah.
There's not an after party, there's not a brunch, we had pizza in the arcade one. I mean, like you did all these things, so not only could the comics meet each other and hang out before their shows and get to know each other, but then industry was also there too, and you guys just make it like a fun, like camp, you know, like you hang out. Like there's still Daya from San Francisco. Like I love her. Like now I know if I go to San Francisco, I can hit up Daya and be like, what show should I do? Like we met there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that connection is a big part. It's figuring out the balance also of having non-show things for comics to do.
Yeah.
but also not trying to like overschedule their lives.
I love an overschedule. I love it.
There's usually
Keeps me out of trouble.
there's usually there's one thing before the shows start to happen for the comics to do, and then there's usually an after party of some sort, whether it be the karaoke thing or dancing at the back door or whatever.
Dancing at the back door was like my favorite thing ever. I bought so many shots for people I didn't even know. Just the whole environment. I was having so much fun.
Yeah. Well, that's what we wanted. We want it to be fun, and I'm always bummed whenever a comic literally only comes and like for one day does their shows and goes. I understand if they have scheduling issues. I totally understand that. But I try to encourage people. It's like, again, I understand you're spending money, but if you're splitting a hotel room or you're getting an Airbnb, staying one extra day, because we usually try to like put the comics 2 shows on 2 different days. Yeah. But we try to get is like you should go watch other shows. You should go hang out. Like that's a big part of it. Yeah. So it's not just your 10 minutes on stage each night.
And it's so prestigious that like, I don't know, I'd want to be there as long as I could because it's just like you're not going to get this experience again. If you do, it's probably going to be rare.
It is hard for people to get in multiple years just because we try to keep it fresh. And then and it's such a difficult thing. But then we do get to see people that we like because this is probably the main thing that I think makes people want to submit to it as far as a comedian goes is not just the reputation that it has and that it's a kind of. Maybe this is egotistical, but it is its own credit in a way. It kind of means something to do Limestone because we don't just take our friends. It means you got something.
That means you were ranked against other people and you got in.
Against 500 other people across the country, and particularly at this point, pretty high level people. We regularly get people that send like their late night spots. We get agents are trying to submit for their clients, and so, but. Not only do you have that sort of thing, but also you get past a feature at the Comedy Attic, which is, it's always crazy to me when people don't take advantage of that. I mean, it's a small club; they can't pay the features a lot, but it's a super respected club, and
it's a cool room. Yeah, it's a really cool room.
But but then we do get to see you guys later because I mean you've come back to the club every single year since then I think and done a feature week. Yeah. So that's a nice thing. Even if it's hard for someone. I want to say there's maybe only like. In the 8 years, there might only be 4 comics who have ever done it more than once.
And then you probably bring a couple back as headliners,
Yes, we also have that spot where we started this a couple years ago. Where of the 8 headliners every year, one of them is always a former feature that we've moved up. Yeah. So like this year it's Dina Hashem. Okay. So Dina came just as a feature when she was just pretty much a new comic out of Jersey, New York. Yeah. And then she since done Conan and Comedy Central.
She's killing it.
And stuff. Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah. So we always have that spot.
Okay? I know that you guys release it. You guys like titillate it. You titillate your releasing of your comedians.
That's a strategic thing, honestly. Yeah. It's not. We release. Basically, we spend the first 8 weeks of every year releasing one headliner a week, and the reason why is that's a way we can stay in your social media feed because badges are not on sale yet. So it's a way for us to stay on your mind, and so we have a dedicated. This is kind of the nerdy.
It's like Christmas
stuff.
though. You're like it comes out. It's like this one now, and then you're like, oh, okay, those two. You get really excited because you're just like, fuck, man, these are like the best of like Patton and Emo, Maria, like. You got Margaret one year. You guys had.
We've had Colin Quinn. We've had Roy Wood Jr. Pete Holmes, Maria Tignataro, Janine Garofalo. These are like the big theater headliners. We've also had just like monsters in the club like Chad Daniels, Aparna and Charla.
I love Aparna so much. Yeah. I met her once in New Orleans. We were doing a show together, and I was like, fucking Aparna. Like she was going up after me, and I was like, I'm freaking out right now. Like, she's the coolest person ever.
She is. She's such a sweetheart. She still is too. Like, even with her like fame has gone up as much as it has. Like,
I'm like teary-eyed right now just remembering that. Like, I'm so because she was like, I got off stage. She's like, you were really good, and I was like, I can't even right now. You don't even know.
This is a sidebar, but what's the best compliment from the most famous comedian that you've ever gotten?
Eliza watched my whole set, and then I came off stage while Hunter was on stage, and she's like, I love your tag on this one. I really thought this one was really like
specific notes,
and I was like, you did not even have to watch me. Yeah. I cannot believe I looked over, and then she got on stage and said, what'd you guys think of Kelly? And like everybody cheered, and she goes, the security keeps mixing us up, and she goes, I'm really happy about that because she has tiny legs. And I've always, okay, I know that's it isn't even a compliment about my joke.
I did ask for a specific compliment, and that is a very specific compliment.
But my legs have been my insecurity my whole life because I play soccer, and like they're kind of like bigger, and you know, you like the thigh gap and hot dog legs are like a thing on the internet or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I will never ever complain about my legs again because one of my favorite people just said that she thought I was.
That's pretty good.
Okay, so I know that's like braggy.
No,
sidebar.
I asked you. I literally asked you.
Well, what's yours?
Well, no one's ever complimented my legs, so now I feel very insecure about what I'm doing on stage. This is kind of, I mean, I don't know. This could have meant a million things, but I did the Improv in LA, and it was just one of those showcasey shows where everybody goes up. And I kept getting bumped, and it looked like I was going to get bumped off the show because famous people kept coming in. And luckily, I knew the guy, Lee Keeler, who was running that specific show, and he kept saying, he was like, I'm going to get you up. He's like, not yet.
Hang in there.
And so I just was like on deck over and over and over again. And then luckily, Dane Cook went out of the room at the wrong time. And so he was able to get me up real quick right after Whitney Cummings like destroyed. It was crazy.
Wow.
But I did my thing. I was literally the only non-famous person on the show. And so the crowd was just like, who are you? But I did fine. And I did like basically.
I'm Matt.
I just did like 5 minutes. I just did 5 minutes. And came and went and sat back down in the back of the room. And then I sat down like, all right, cool. That was all right, I guess. And then I happened to glance over to my right, and I had sat about 1.5 feet away from David Chappelle.
Shut the fuck up.
And he just looks at me, and he just gives me like a head nod, like eye contact head nod. And I was like, that's all I need, thank you.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to try and talk to you. I was like, so I just gave it back. I was like, all right, I give the thank you head nod. Yeah. That's like, he acknowledged me as a comedian,
Oh, my
so
heart.
that's pretty good. I mean, I just opened for Chad Daniels, which he's
the best.
Yeah, he's an amazing. I mean, just a phenomenal comedian. Literally, it's like he's one of these guys I think about his bits all the time. Yeah. Because he's so good, and we grabbed dinner after the show, and he was kind of like giving me specific, like, I thought this was great. So that is that specific note sometimes that really makes you understand. I feel like a great compliment one time on one of my jokes. Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you still like fan over people, or do you see them as peers?
I try really hard not to fan over people, and I think I learned a lot of that from being in touring and being with bands and stuff all the time.
They don't want that, right?
They don't want that.
Yeah.
Some people want that.
Yeah.
Most people. Pete Holmes wants that. Most people don't. I'll say that about Pete. Old Petey Pants.
Yeah.
But most people don't want that. Most people want you to just treat them like a human being,
right,
and to not bother them.
Right.
But I've been lucky to open for Tig a couple of times, and Tig is a very unique personality, and like her on stage is pretty much her off stage, and so that's not your normal energy.
I'd be like, are you mad at me?
Well, because she's so quiet and so dry.
What did I do? But I'd be the worst.
But because I had gotten to know her a little bit from the first time, and then the second time I was just like asking her about her kids. Yeah. And she asked me about my niece and my nephew because she knows I don't have. She was like, "You don't have kids, right?" I was like, "No." It's like I have a niece and a nephew, and so we were showing pictures, and it's just like that's what they.
Human.
They're human. Yeah. They're human, and I might, I would never give a tag up. That's a big cardinal sin. Yeah. But if I have told people, it's like that bit is like Chad. Chad has this new bit about daddy issues, and that men have them, right? And so I was like, I've not really seen that particular take, and of course, because it's Chad, it's brilliant. Yeah. And I was like, you're cutting to the core of this sort of like toxic masculinity without even saying the words, without even saying the words toxic masculinity. You're really getting to the core of it, and but I mean, which they're also still comedians. They also want to hear that, that you're not just like, oh, I love you, you're famous. It's just like your work is important, and this is why I think it's important.
That's a good point. Yeah. So when choosing the headliners, what's kind of do you go who would kill in Bloomington, or you're like, who do I like? What's kind of the strategy around choosing the headliners for the festival?
I don't know if we've ever really said who would kill in Bloomington as a first thought. I think that might come into the equation later on. We have a basic umbrella of style that we book under. I mean, it has the festival has a certain kind of personality, and it's kind of an extension of the Comedy Addicts booking. Jared books the headliners. Everything the way we kind of talk about it is Jared is like 51% in charge of the headliners, and I'm 51% in charge of the feature and feature level, and Jared's like 100% in charge of MCs because those are the local comics that he's kind of grooming to come up through the system. I have a little bit of input, but where I can be like, I don't know if you noticed, but I think this person's getting pretty good, like that kind of stuff. We talk about everything, and we definitely have people that we like and we think are good fits for the festival. And it's just, it's difficult, you know, it's like, it's money, it's scheduling, who's available. We're trying to book this thing before pilot season. A lot of agents don't want to let their clients commit because they might be getting a sitcom and all this kind of stuff.
These are all things I would have never thought about. I would just be like, I like this person. Let's see how much they cost and if they're free. Like, I don't know how anything works.
Well, it does start with, are they free and how much do they cost? Okay. And then, you know, but I mean, you know, that's the thing too, is like Jared's vision that he brought to it the very first year was to come out of the gates really big. I don't know. Jared has pretty much always been a couple years ahead of the comedy industry. He's always kind of like, he was booking Marin before Marin came back. Like he booked Maria before she blew up. He's like the first person. He's very
smart. He's very intuitive. I feel like.
Yeah, he's the first person to ever headline Nikki Glaser ever.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He booked Amy Schumer. It was I think the first club to ever book Amy outside of New York as a headliner way back in the day. Like he's always been like, he can tell, you know. And so I think he knew that this festival explosion was about to happen. And a way to stand out was to come out of the gates pretty big. So, I mean, our first year we had 4 of the biggest comedians working, you know, so we had Tig, Maria, Pete Holmes, Doug Benson. Yeah. And then another 4 smaller club headliners too. So that's definitely to his genius. And, you know, we talk about stuff, but I usually defer to him because I feel like he usually knows.
I mean, that's how you start that's how you get a good reputation out of the gate. Wow, look at all these people who are coming to this. Yeah. If it's kind of like Wayne's World, how they built Wayne stock.
Yeah, exactly. That's the model. Exactly. I didn't want to give it away, but that's exactly how we decided.
I figured. Yeah. We were talking last night about Wayne's World a little too much, and I was like, you know what? I think he draws a lot of inspiration too.
For most of my life, really. Yeah, it's Wayne's World too, really. Let's be clear.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to mix the Wayne's.
The Waynes
together. Yeah. Okay, so why'd you name it Limestone? Just because of the rocky limestone around Bloomington?
Yes, I wanted a name that was like Moon Tower. The great thing about Moon Tower is if you're from Austin, Texas, you know what the Moon Tower is. Yeah. Or if you're a huge fan of the Dazed and Confused movie, you know what the Moon Tower is. But if you don't, it just sounds cool. It just sounds like a band name. It just sounds like something cool. And that's the same thing we wanted with Limestone. It has a tie to our region because the county that we're in is the top limestone producer of the world or whatever. And it just sounds cool if you don't know. Like we've had people that don't know that limestone is a mineral. Yeah. You know, it just, you know, it rolls off the tongue well. It sounds, you know, and
it was named after our grandfather Limestone. Yes. Who came here and founded the Comedy Attic.
Yes, on his penny farthing. Yes. Yes. So that was the main reason. I mean, we kicked around a couple of other names, and you know, I think Jared at one point wanted to float something like the Midwest Comedy Festival or something like that, which, you know, is just kind of bland sounding. Limestone. We both had a vision too.
It's so specific. You know exactly what it is now. You don't have to say
Comedy Festival after it. Yeah. In the comedy world, you just say Limestone. People know what you're talking about. Yeah. And then also, it lends itself well for branding in a way that we try to do, which I now see a lot of other comedy festivals do. We've always tried to make our posters and stuff look more like music festival posters than the comedy. Like you won't see like Groucho glasses and shit like that on.
I loved my poster the year I went. It was amazing. And they put even us little, like, non-featured, I guess we're features, but the non-headliners.
Even the MCs are on the poster.
Yeah. I mean, it's just...
It's important.
You guys do such a good job of making the comics feel like this wouldn't happen without them, and you make them feel appreciative, even though we're appreciative even to get in. It's like this mutual, like... enjoyment of this thing that we're all doing together, and it's like we're all in this weird niche, this kind of weird world that you're, you know, obsessed with and nerded out about, and it's just so welcoming and nice.
Yeah. Well, we try. I mean, again, back to the core origin of it was we wanted it was built basically for the feature level comedians and for the fans.
Do you guys have a mission statement? I know that's weird.
Mission statement? No, I don't know if we need one.
Make one up right now.
Make up a mission statement?
Yeah.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. That's our mission statement.
So, any kind of hints about what you guys are doing this year?
Well, we've already announced a few people like Chris Red and Dina Hashem, and we just announced Never Not Funny's coming back to tape an episode. We are looking at, now we're in year 8, we're looking at playing around with the structure a little bit. Like 2 years ago, we added a new venue, the Blockhouse, and then that worked out really well. We've been very deliberate to not try to grow it too quickly. We were very lucky to see Bridgetown was a couple years ahead of us. They had
which they're not around anymore.
They're not around anymore. They did 10 years and then wrapped it, which I totally understand. Doing it now for 8 years, and to be honest, Jared and I have kind of talked about it a couple times. Like as our lives get more busy, like he's a father of 2 kids that are getting older and more into activities and stuff. And I'm on the road a lot. We have talked about we get why you do 10 and then bow out. Yeah, it makes sense in a lot of ways. But Bridgetown had a year where they tried to grow too much because they were hot. And it was a disastrous year and bottomed out, and they were able to recover very smartly. But because of that, we've always been we saw that happen. We've been very, very deliberate about not trying to grow the festival too much because we want there to be people at all the shows. We don't want to have all these shows everywhere, and every show has 5 people in the audience.
Yeah, I will say it's very attended and it's very hyped up. Like it seems like the whole community of Bloomington, like you have sponsors, you have corporate sponsors. You have venues that are, partnering with you. You have people who partner with you for the after parties and everything like that. So it seems like there's a lot of planning that goes into it. But it also is like one of the things that makes Bloomington magical. Yeah.
Well, and it's one of those things where, we still work on it 9 months out. Basically, Jared and I talk almost every single day for 9 months. And then we don't talk to each other for 3 months. Right after that, we basically take a break from one another. Okay. But and that's something that we built. The first year we had 2 sponsors, and one of those was just an in trade, and then the other one was for $500 or something. So that first one was like, if it didn't go well, like Jared and I were both probably gonna have to take out second mortgages on our houses to cover our ass. Yeah. But we proved to the community what it was. That was the biggest thing, was we were trying to get sponsors the first year, but people just didn't know what it was and didn't see it. But then after a couple of years of success and you get press and you start to win awards and things like that, then...
What awards have you guys won?
We won the Cultural Vision Award from Nuvo, which is an arts magazine in Indianapolis that kind of covers... They also distribute in Bloomington, which is very cool. I got to meet Tamika, WNBA player, plays for the Fever. She also won that year. And then we also won...
Best personality.
Best
hair.
Big event or something like that from our local visitors bureau. Cool. We've got a couple little trophy things.
But still, it's nice to be recognized, and then
that helps
sponsors.
We're
a real thing, guys.
We're a real thing, and then that gets companies to buy in, and then the thing is also like you get a company that comes in for a couple $1,000s or whatever as a sponsor. And then, part of that is they get tickets and stuff. And then you hope that they aren't horribly offended by something a comedian says.
Oh, yeah.
But also, we're not...
So many things to think about.
But we're also not going to not book someone like Margaret Cho, who might push the boundaries a little bit here and there, is a good example. Because it's like, it's an art first. And if we lose a sponsor of it, we don't really care.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So tell me how... Anybody who's listening, who's not a comedian, is still listening.
I think only comedians are going to listen to this and be like...
They might be.
Yeah.
But if you snuck in there as an audience member and you're like, I like comedy, let's hear what they have to say. How do you want to let them know about how to find out about the event? Or
just limestonefest.com is our website. You can also just Google Limestone Comedy Festival. We're on all the things. We are in the beginning stages of announcing everything. So we'll be announcing a new headliner every week through the end of February. And tickets go on sale in March. Yeah. It's a good time. And we do have fans that literally will come from states away that have come every single year. There's a couple that drives their RV every year from Illinois. They park it in the Kroger parking lot. I love that. And we help them figure that out. They wrote us one year, where can we, and so we talked to some people to find, actually, I think they park it in the convention center parking lot. But, and so it's a good time, and we're looking forward to another good one. And,
okay. Yeah. And then anything for comedians to know about if they, of course, they they probably already know about Limestone if they're a comic.
I would say this is honestly I'm the opposite of a lot of people. I try to encourage comics not to submit, and I know that seems weird, but if you do not have a killer 5-minute clip, don't submit it. If it's not, and I'm not saying that every single joke has to crush, but if it's not very, very strong, you're not going to get selected. It's just very competitive now. It's just incredibly competitive, and so save your money, you know. And so I would say, you know, that would be the number one thing I would say is like.
Which is actually very kind of you to say, because a lot of people are. I see a lot of festival. You know, we're open to everybody. Just pay us your $45 or your $25 or whatever, and it's like. It's nice to hear like the parameters that you guys are looking at, and it's nice that you guys are so transparent about the selection process.
Right. Well, I used to tell people when we first started, I would say you should have been doing comedy, and I mean like really doing it, like going up once a week at least, for 2 years before you think about submitting.
Yeah.
And then that moved up to like 5 years. But with that being said, we have taken people who had amazing sets, like amazing videos, who then showed up and crushed at the festival live too, and then we find out during the weekend of the festival that they've only been doing comedy for 8 months when they tape that clip.
Who's this asshole?
There's a couple of people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I mean, Emma Arnold had only been doing stand-up for like a year when she got in.
Oh yeah,
now, she's
very funny.
She's very good, but she had come from a storytelling kind of background, so she had some other experience. But so now I don't try to put a year thing on it. Now I try to say like, if your 5-minute set is. That clip is hot, and it's objectively hot. Not you think it's hot, not your best friend thinks it's hot. You know, and that's another thing is like if you have a friend in comedy that will be honest with you, have them watch it and watch their clip and give each other honest notes. Yeah. It is very competitive. So I would say that would be the number one thing is make sure that you have a really, really strong clip that you're proud of before you send it in. Trying to think. Make sure you follow the instructions. So many, it says right there, we need 5 minutes, and then people will send like a 4-minute and 15-second clip. Those are people I don't write back. Yeah. You know, it's one thing if like, oh, there's a technical snafu or whatever. I have written people when like the audio's too low and just been like, they're watching these on laptop speakers. Yeah. They can't hear it. You have to send me a different clip. But yeah, just, I mean, use some common sense. Don't be a talking ball of light. You know, they should be able to see you in the clip. Oh, they should be able to hear you clearly.
In my head, I was like, oh, that sounds oddly specific. Yeah. Who's wearing their light costume on stage?
You know, like someone puts their camera in the back of the room, and because of the stage lights, it's literally just a ball of light that's telling the jokes. That's bad. Don't do that. Because you really, again, even if you have a great set as a talking ball of light, you're competing against people who had great sets that we could see their faces and their facial expressions and get the rest of the jokes. Listen, you know, every little thing that's bad about your clip is going to hurt your chances. Unfortunately, like if there's a ton of like server noise, there's always someone that sets their videotape up literally next to the ice machine or whatever. It's like, well, if we miss half the jokes because the ice machine is dumping ice, that's bad.
I'm gonna open up a comedy club that just is
nothing but ice machines?
No, nothing but video stands and places where you can get a good clip, because I feel like it's so kind of it's so hard sometimes because you're doing it yourself. Like there's not, you can ask a comic like, hey, can you check on my tape while it's taping? And then they don't, you know, they'll fuck it up too. And it's just so hard to like. Yeah.
Or, you know, like there's so many horror stories, you know, it's like also like, I understand that your significant other or your buddy is trying to be supportive, but whoever's taping it for you that's laughing directly into the microphone of the which is like just you know, that's distracting. That's not good. There's a million like little things like that are going to knock you out of the running, you know. So just tape everything. Just tape all the sets. Yeah. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. On a personal note. Please
don't harass Matt.
Please do not harass me. Please do not make it the first thing out of your mouth if we happen to be on a showcase show. I am a working comedian. I try to keep it very separate. That's like the show last night. The guys are super great, and they were asking me what credit I wanted to be brought up by, and I said Tom or whatever. And then they're like, "You want me to mention anything about Limestone?" I was like, "No, because the general population doesn't even know what it is, and if they do know, they don't care. And that's not a credit for my comedy. No, that's a credit for my event management. Right. That's something for my LinkedIn page. Yeah. That's not for this guy's funny. It's just this guy's got an Excel spreadsheet, you know.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I applied. I got in the 1 year, and I applied. I think I waited like 3 or 4 years to apply again, and I submitted like kind of a half-assed tape, and I didn't get in. And I in no way took it personally because I was like, well, the stakes are raised that much more. I know my tape wasn't that good. And I will say this, you guys wrote me an amazing rejection letter, which I really appreciate. I thought it was thought out. It was.
I don't really think of them as rejection letters, but that's
okay. Or
like you didn't get in letter. It was like
didn't get in letter, but like. It was like I wasn't even offended because I was like, you know what, I've done it before, which I thought was great. I already know that the stakes are like I just repeated everything I just said, but I'm just saying like
not everybody's as understanding as you. And here's the thing about that is so we we email everybody letting them know whether they got in or not. If you took the time to submit, that's the least we can do. That is one thing I will say about Bridgetown. It was really shitty that they would not email you unless you got in. And so you you're waiting and you're seeing other people start to post on Facebook or whatever that they got in, and you're like, oh, well, maybe they just haven't got through it.
Oh,
like,
let me check my spam filter.
Let me check my spam filter, all that kind of stuff. That is, to me, that was very disrespectful to people that took the time to submit, paid money to submit. The least you can do is send an email saying, yes, you got in. I'm sorry you were not selected. Or we also have an alternate list, which those are basically the 3 emails that we send out. And then our alternates get to submit the next year for free. Yeah. Like it's not.
That's cool. That's awesome. And so don't harass Matt, guys, because he's not the one doing this. Right. It's a panel.
It's a review panel. Like I don't care. Be nice to me like you would hopefully that you would be to any human being that you encounter. But like, it's also like, it's bad when someone's like clearly sucking up to me. It's like, I hate that. I hate that so much. It's just like, I'm not a fan. Yeah. Yeah.
I personally would love that power. Okay. But
start the Cully Collette Comedy Festival.
Yeah, exactly. It's just me and my dog. Just get to perform in our living room.
Hot fest.
Yeah, $100. Pay me. I love it. Okay, so anything else you want to end on with Limestone or just yourself? If you're.
Yeah. Oh, I would say one thing about rejection. And I am a comic, and I submit to a lot of stuff, and I also don't get into a lot of stuff. And it's 100% understandable that it hurts your feelings. Yeah. We're all human. We're gonna have that emotion, process it, say whatever you need to say out loud in the room at the time. Do not send us a shitty email. Because I guarantee you, I will remember forever. Yeah. Like, I have Irish Alzheimer's. I forget everything but the grudges. Right? And
I have the same thing. Yeah. I didn't know there was a name for it.
It's that, it's a well-known thing in the Irish American community. So if you send that shitty email, you're just letting us know you're kind of a dick. Yeah. And now I don't care how good your next clip is. I'm probably going to remember it. That you sent that shitty email. Again, it's a totally normal emotion to have. Yeah. This is like you wouldn't do that for a job. You did if you applied for a job and they was like, sorry, you wouldn't send Colgate or somebody like, well, fuck you. You're like, I'm the best marketer there is. You guys are missing out. You wouldn't do that, hopefully. So don't do it to us. Right. Because there's a lot of people that didn't get in like a year or 2 years in a row, didn't even make the alternate list, who then got in. Because there is a tracking thing. The review panel does switch out members over the years, but there's usually a little bit of an overlap. So there are people that in their notes are like, I remember this guy from last year. This is a way better clip. I gave him a maybe last year. I'm giving him a yes this year. They've stepped up. So that gets erased if you sent a in-the-moment shitty email back.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Yeah. I mean, I think that... we're comics, so we're all into this to not be professional, but be professional. Like, that's... to be professional as an unprofessional can be, you know?
The great Cam O'Connor said you need 3 things. You need to be nice, be funny, and be on time. If you're 2 of those 3 things, you'll go far in comedy.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I think that's great advice, honestly. It is. It boils it down to that. Like, you got to be funny. And you got there's also people you know that get ahead that are just because they're nice and they're on time.
Yeah.
that aren't even funny.
I was just trying to think. I was like, which one am I not? And I was like,
You can be all 3. You don't have to pick one to not be.
No, I'm not going to be nice anymore. Yeah. No, I'm not nice anyway. Okay, so Limestone, and can you give us the date?
We moved. It's May 28th through the 30th. It's traditionally been the first weekend in June, but we had to move it last year for scheduling reasons for Jared's family stuff, and then this year we had to move it because the first weekend in June is the 200th anniversary of Indiana University.
Oh,
and
shit.
They're doing a few things, and every hotel in like a 6,000-mile radius is booked, and just like we were like, we'll move our little thing.
We'll
That's
scoot
fine.
ours over.
Scoot
That's
it over.
fine. These hotels are going to be churning out money.
Yeah, no, May 28th through the 30th, and there's a delightful little tiny house you can rent in some lady's backyard if you want to come.
Hell yeah.
I'm living my best life.
Special thanks to Mat Alano-Martin for being the guest on this podcast. I woke him up super early to do the podcast. Comedians crash each other's houses. I don't know if you guys know that. That's what we do sometimes. And he was like, "Are you hungry?" And I was like, "Before anything, please sit with me for an hour and talk about everything." So, real trooper for letting me withhold food for him. And you guys, what am I doing here? We're having fun, right? Right? I love talking about festivals. I love talking to people. This is the best, and I appreciate you being here and listening. Special thanks to Phil for doing the editing for the show. Phil works for Me Compadre, P-O-D. Check him out. And if you have an idea for a festival that you want me to cover, go to festlifepodcast@gmail.com and hit me up. And yeah, I look forward to hearing that, you guys. Leave us some feedback and check out our Instagram. Love you so much. Love you. Okay, bye.
If you're broke,
Then save your money.
get a job.
Don't get that coffee.
Once a